In your program, we know Securing the AI Frontier is going to be a keynote by Congressman Ted Lieu. However, before I bring him up, I think it's important, and he's got a lot of accolades, and we all know, but sometimes it's just really important for us to understand from whence we came. Congressman is a South Bay resident and former Torrance City Councilman. He's in his 5th term in Congress and has become the go-to voice on all things technology and is one of only 2 members in Congress with a computer science degree. I did not know that, Congressman. I did not know that. He's got a list of accomplishments, but in relationship to today's topic, we want to touch on a few things. He's introduced legislation to improve cybersecurity in consumer products, create a national AI commission, prioritize consumer safety in technological advanced cars, and ensure law enforcement and tech companies protect consumer privacy. Most recently, Congressman Ted has been named the co-chair of the House's bipartisan task force on artificial intelligence. I would love to hear how those conversations are going, for sure. Congressman Lieu, we want to thank you for your time this afternoon. We know you got a busy schedule, but we appreciate you spending some time with us. For us, it's great to know we have a leader from the South Bay in Congress looking out for us. So at this time, I want to welcome Congressman Ted Lieu. You say a few words, and when you're done, we'll have a seat and have a chat. Right. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So, good afternoon. I'm going to stand here because I can see more of the room this way. Last week, I was on the floor of the House of Representatives. So I just want to first say what a thrill it is for me to now stand in front of normal, rational, kind people. Thank you, Mark, for that wonderful introduction. And I want to give a great big shout out to your amazing Executive Director, Jackie Bacharach, for her long service and her amazing leadership of the South Bay City's Council of Governments. So let's give her a great big round of applause. Yeah. I want to thank your chair, Cedric Hicks, for the great work that he is doing this year. And also to the South Bay City's COG's amazing staff member, David Legier. My only disappointment with David is that he left my office to come here. So before I talk about AI, I just want to give you a little bit of an update on DC legislation that affected the South Bay. So last term, as you know, we passed the American Rescue Plan that provided large amounts of funding to cities and school districts in the South Bay. We then followed that up with a bipartisan infrastructure law that's bringing projects across America, including to the South Bay and also to Southern California. And then we passed the Inflation Reduction Act. Half of the revenues went to pay down the deficit. Half of it funded the largest amount of clean energy and climate change projects in world history, including a hydrogen hub coming down to Southern California. Yeah. And we're going to be working on additional legislation as well for the South Bay. I'm very pleased that as a member of Congress, I was able to secure $11.5 million for projects in my district, much of which went to the South Bay as well. Yeah. So now let me talk about AI. I'm going to talk about 3 topics within AI. The first is, why is this different? We've had AI with us for decades, but why are we all of a sudden talking about it now? And then I'm talk about how sort of federal lawmakers, or how I view how we might want to regulate AI. And the third, I'll talk about actual things that are happening at the federal level in terms of regulating AI. So we've had AI for decades and decades and decades. I am a recovering computer science major. And when I was getting a computer science degree, we made fun of people who worked on neural networks. We're like, oh, that's never going to work. Well, guess what? It started working. And they were saying, we're going to make computers think like human beings. Like, that's never going to happen. What started to happen? So about 10 years ago, you started to see amazing advances. And that's why, if you remember, all of a sudden, voice recognition became pretty amazing. You could call up any airline you wanted, and you can slur your words, have an accent, and it would magically understand what flight you wanted to get on. Facial recognition is pretty amazing. You've got AI in your cell phone that lets you navigate pretty much anywhere you want. We have AI in smart washing machines. But none of that got people super excited. We never had conferences and on why we should regulate that kind of AI, right? So what happened is about less than a year and a half ago, November 2022, OpenAI shocked the world when they released something called ChatGPT worldwide. And so this is an application, and some of you have tried it, some of you may not. I urge you to try it because first of all, the original version is free. But if you don't want to try that, you can go and use Microsoft's Bing, which is similar, that's free, or Google's Gemini. These are called large language generative AI models. And so for the first time, people could type in different queries to ChatGPT, for example. You can say, well, why was the Battle of Midway such an important battle in World War II? And then it would magically write a amazing essay with very nice sounding sentences and paragraphs, and then you can turn it into your history teacher. My wife, Betty, is on a Torrance school board, and so they're trying to deal with these issues. So I just want to explain to you a little bit about how this technology works and 3 things about it that are different that might want to cause us to regulate it in a way that we did not seek to regulate the navigation app on your cell phone. Right? So the first is, let me just talk about how this AI sort of works at a very basic level. So think about when you see a cute puppy, right? You're like, oh, that's a cute puppy. All right. The way a computer views it, imagine a picture of a puppy in 2 dimensions. Maybe it's 1,000 pixels, right? Now you imagine a 3-dimensional picture of that puppy. It's an entire grid of pixels. And then imagine an entire array of these grids. So you have tens of thousands of these pixels, all of which have a number attached to it. And then these pixels are connected to other pixels, and that connection has a number. And at the beginning, it's totally random. And so you feed this algorithm a picture of a puppy, and it says, oh, that's not a puppy. You're like, you're wrong. So the algorithm changes some of these numbers. You give it a second picture of a puppy. It says, that's not a puppy. You're like, you're wrong again. It then changes some more numbers in its algorithm. And then you give it a third picture of a puppy. It says, this is a puppy. You're like, yes, you're right. It changes some more numbers in its algorithm. You do this a million times, and then this algorithm figures out what is a puppy and what is not a puppy. What we don't know is we don't actually know how it works. And so we can't actually trace it from point A to the conclusion because there's so many data points, it's such a long formula, it's literally impossible to know what this AI algorithm was doing. So it's a traceability problem, that's what people call it. And this could lead to some pretty significant problems because we don't know what this AI is recognizing. So I'll give you an example. There was a famous experiment where these researchers are trying to figure out, hey, can we use AI in the healthcare setting to figure out if someone has tuberculosis from X-ray scans? Because if you could sort of do that, you would see why we need less radiologists, right? So they were developing this, and during development, it worked out really well. And then when they deployed it, it totally failed. And as they went and did audits and tried to figure out what happened, they realized what this AI algorithm was doing is it was simply looking at the scan and making a decision, was this from a newer X-ray machine or an older X-ray machine? Because it turned out that people with tuberculosis tended not to be in jurisdictions that were wealthier, that were in Western countries that had newer X-ray machines. They were in places that had older X-ray machines. But because the researchers didn't know what pattern this AI was recognizing, they totally misunderstood what was actually happening. So that's one issue with this new AI that's different than prior AIs. The second is this AI is not designed to seek the truth. And so if you forget forget everything about my speech except this, just one thing I want you to remember. When you go on ChatGPT and you ask a query, it is not designed to seek the truth. It is designed to seek the most popular response to your question. So what it's literally doing is it's going, okay, what is the next word that I can pick that answers your question? So you imagine, right, all these pixels, and imagine if every of them had a word in English language. So basically the computer program is just going, okay, I'm gonna string together these words that have the highest probability of answering your question, and then I'm gonna form a sentence, and then I'm gonna form a paragraph, and then I'm gonna form an entire essay. So what could end up happening, and it's a very technical term, in the industry they call it hallucination. So ChatGPT can answer your query with a perfectly sounding paragraph or an essay that is totally bonkers wrong. It could be completely false, but it'll read really quite well. And there was an example of this when, by the way, if you're a lawyer, just never do this. So this lawyer basically had one of these large language models simply write an entire brief, and he submitted it to a judge. He may have been sanctioned for this. So what happened is, what the AI algorithm realizes, you know, I scanned all, right, these AI algorithms, they scrape the entire internet to get all this information. So this AI algorithm thought, you know, all these legal briefs, they have these funny looking things called case names that just sort of appear at the end of sentences. And so this AI algorithm literally just stuck in random case names at random parts of the brief. And these are fake cases that didn't exist, but the algorithm was, you know, as a probability matching thing, realized briefs look like this, so I'm gonna give you a brief that looks like that. So that's the second thing that you should be concerned about, right? This algorithm, at a fundamental level, we don't know what it's doing, and second, we can't trace it. We can't trace it, we don't know what it's doing, and second, it's not designed to seek the truth. And then the third thing that I want to explain to you, maybe the best way to say it is, we don't know what we don't know. So the advancements in AI have been amazingly fast from these large generative AI models. So in less than a year since ChatGPT came out, it was text to text, right? You would write in sentences and it would return you sentences. It went to text to video. So you could write in, for example, a prompt that said, hey, I want a video of a dolphin flying through the air with a flock of seagulls, and then goes into the ocean, meets some dinosaurs, gets scared, and then turns into a clam. And then you have this amazing video that does that. And then they have text to audio, where you can essentially give this algorithm a minute of someone's voice. Maybe it's your voice, maybe it's Joe Biden's voice, or Donald Trump's voice, or any other person's voice. And then you type in sentences, and it will put out audio that sounds remarkably like your voice, or your daughter's voice, or Joe Biden's voice, or Donald Trump's voice. And we had this happen earlier this year in New Hampshire, where a robocall went out that sounded amazingly like Joe Biden, that was fake, that basically told people not to vote. And then we now have text to programming. So you could, for example, some of these applications, you could, either now or not in too distant future, say, just simply with a prompt, I want you, AI, to write a software program for me that takes every picture in my phone, matches it up against public databases, and names every person in those pictures for me. In about 2 years, or maybe less, you can go to text to complicated programming. You could literally say, hey, AI, my calculator app is not working. I want you to write me a new calculator application that does trigonometry. And then, a couple minutes later, you're gonna get this program that does that. So imagine 1 billion people walking around that with some simple commands can write complicated software programs that then goes out and does stuff. I don't know what that world looks like. It's sort of amazing and alarming at the same time. So the third thing you should know about this new AI is it's moving very, very rapidly. And it's hard to know exactly where we're gonna be, 5 years from now, let alone 2 years from now. Okay, so having sort of those three things, traceability, hallucination, and the amazing speed at which it's going, I'm going to tell you how I view AI from the perspective of a federal lawmaker. And to me, the best analogy is think of two large bodies of water, two bodies of water, a large ocean of AI, and then this small lake of AI. Maybe we'll call it a pond of AI. Okay, so large ocean of AI is all the AI we don't care about. So if the AI in your smart toaster has a preference for bagels over wheat toast, we do not care about that, right? It's going to be this little pound of AI that we care about. And why might we care about that? To me, there's at least three buckets. The first is AI that can destroy the world. So the Department of Defense has these weapons known as autonomous weapons, weapons that launch automatically. I've introduced bipartisan bicameral legislation that essentially says no matter how amazing AI ever gets, we're never, ever going to let it launch a nuclear weapon by itself. Yeah, thank you. All right. Yeah. By the way, so I introduced this, I just want to say, well before the movie The Creator came out. If you see that movie, one of the first things that happens, I'm not giving it away because it happened so quickly in the first few minutes, AI literally destroys Los Angeles with a nuclear weapon. But anyways, second bucket is, okay, AI that's not going to destroy the world, but could kill you individually. So when your cell phone malfunctions, it's not going 55 miles per hour. Turns out there's a lot of AI in moving objects, planes, trains, automobiles. So, for example, when it comes to, let's say, creating art, maybe it's okay if the AI hallucinates. Or when you wanted to write an essay, maybe your history teacher won't like that it wrote a totally false paragraph. That's not great. But that's very different, right, if an airplane is using AI, one of these large generative language models, and it decides to hallucinate, right? So there are certain applications where you cannot have this AI be correct 99% of the time. You have applications where it's got to be correct 1,000% of the time, every single time. Or maybe not. So let's think about automated vehicles. About 40,000 people die every year from traffic accidents. Most of that is human error. It's pretty clear to me and most experts that AI and automated driving will in fact reduce human error. So let's say you can make an automated car that will be somewhat better than a human driver. But maybe 1 in 100,000 times it hallucinates, does something totally crazy. Do you deploy that? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Even though, on average, it's going to save lives, but it might do things you have no idea what it's doing because, again, we don't fundamentally at a very basic level know exactly what it's doing. Do you deploy that car? Maybe you do. Things for governments, local, state, and federal to think about. So that was the second bucket, right? And I also think there should be more state and federal regulators who are more attuned to unique aspects of AI, who are looking at anything that is moving around that has AI in it. And the third bucket is going to be the hardest, which is AI that has some sort of harm to society that doesn't kill you. So you, for example, would not want to be denied a loan because a neural network said you don't deserve it, right? That's probably not a good answer. And if this neural network had biases, if it had biases based on gender or race or another protected class, that would not be good. I mentioned facial recognition earlier. It is amazing technology, but many of the facial recognition applications right now are simply less accurate for people with darker skin. So if you deploy this nationwide at law enforcement agencies, to me it's a huge equal protection violation because minorities are going to be misidentified at higher rates. So I've introduced legislation that puts guardrails on facial recognition technology. So you can think of a number of cases where you wouldn't want this AI to be biased. And the problem is we don't know if it's biased because, again, we don't really know what pattern it's doing for a lot of these applications. We just know, hey, we simulate enough, we run enough tests, it looks like it works. Now, it's possible, right, if a company does it really well and they do enough scenarios, enough simulations, such as with automated vehicles, you might get to a point where you're like, okay, we'll deploy this. Even though we know that maybe there's some random thing, scenario we never thought of where it can go crazy. We know that for most use cases, most of the time it's going to work and it's going to save lives. So those are decisions society and government's going to have to make. Within this bucket of harm, I also put in the unfair monetization of AI. So let's think about intellectual property. The way these large language models work right now is they go and they scrape the entire internet of all the information generated. Well, it turns out that some of the information is, for example, the copyrighted songs of Taylor Swift. So let's say this AI trains itself on this information, including the songs of Taylor Swift. Does that company have to compensate Taylor Swift? So we had a hearing. I'm on the House Judiciary Committee. I'm specifically on the Intellectual Property Subcommittee, and we had a hearing on this. So I asked that question. It was one of the witnesses was a former general counsel of the Copyright Office. He was a very pro-fair use person, so he thought most things essentially shouldn't be compensated. So I asked him that question. He said, "No, I don't think so. He doesn't think she should be compensated." I said, "Okay. Well, what if we then take this AI and it generates lyrics in the style of Taylor Swift? Do you have to compensate her for that?" And he said, "No, probably not. It's probably fair use." I said, "Oh, okay. Well, what if you take the lyrics in the style of Taylor Swift and then you generate audio that sounds amazingly like Taylor Swift? Do you have to compensate her?" He sort of hedged at that point, and I said, "Well, what if you add video to that? It looks remarkably like Taylor Swift." And so he didn't know, so he ended up with that. All right. 2 weeks later, I get a letter from another former general counsel of the Copyright Office saying, "Oh, he's all wrong. He thought Taylor Swift should get compensated for all this." So even within the intellectual property community, you get splits within how should this work. It's one reason we had the Hollywood strike, right? We had a writer's strike, we had an actor and actors strike, because they had to deal with AI affecting their industry. So my view is we're going to have rules of the road. I don't know what those rules of the road will be. We just have to have them, because otherwise it's sort of the Wild West out there. Their guilds and the unions and the industry came together and said, "Okay, for these 3 years, this is what we agreed to, and these are the rules of the road." And so I think that's going to start happening across many industries. Not clear to me government has much of a role. It's just going to be something employees have to figure out. So I'll give you one more example on this. I was talking to an executive at a Fortune 50 company, and he said, "Our programmers are 30% more efficient now using AI than before. They have a program that basically is autocomplete for their programmers. So you type in some code, and then it completes it for you." So if you sort of calculate that out, that means their programmers are now more efficient in a 4-day work week using AI than right now in a 5-day work week not using AI. Well, what do you do with that? I vote for the 4-day work week. So I am actually a co-author of legislation by Congressman Mark Takano that incentivizes the 4-day work week. But this company could also fire 30% of its programmers. Or a company could make its programmers work 30% more efficiently. What's going to happen? I don't know. Different industries will have sort of different responses to that. And so let me now get to my final point, which is what are some actual things that are happening at the federal level. So I'm very pleased that Speaker Johnson and Leader Jeffries created the bipartisan House task force on AI. I am the Democratic co-lead. My counterpart is Republican Congressman Jay Obernolte, and it's a 24-member task force, half Democrats, half Republicans, and we're charged with essentially coming up with what kinds of AI we should regulate and how we might want to go about doing so. We'll be issuing a report by the end of the year. In addition, we might be making recommendations on certain bills we might want to pass this year. I personally think it is highly unlikely we're going to pass some 5,000-page omnibus bill on AI with 57 topics and sort of say we're done with it. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be a multi-year process. It's going to be iterative. It's going to be, different bills, different years trying to address different issues. So one of the things we're focused on right now is the elections, because it is coming up, right? The presidential in November, and we've got deep fakes out there. And so let me talk to you a little bit about that. Some of you may have seen the Forrest Gump movie, and in that movie, the character Tom Hanks plays has this amazing scene with President John F. Kennedy. And if you remember that scene, it looks really real, it looks super cool. We all know it's fake. But clearly we had this technology for decades and decades on how to do this. Well, what's different now is that you don't need a movie studio to do this. Anyone in the basement of their home could do that. Or a KGB officer sitting in Moscow could do that. So you have a proliferation of billions of people that could launch deep fakes of videos or audio. And so we're trying to figure out ways of how we either require disclosure or have, content watermarking, or have social media and other companies do more on trying to alert people that they're in fact seeing an AI-generated video or audio or some sort of deep fake. So that's something we want to be sort of focused on in the short term. Separate from what Congress is doing, the White House, the Biden-Harris administration has put out a pretty good executive order that does empower a number of agencies to do more in their fields to regulate AI. It is a long order. If you're interested, you should just go on whitehouse.gov and you can read it. So the administration is on this. They understand the problem, so they're working on it. And recently, I was at the State Department's first inaugural plenary session with about 50 different countries, and I spoke at that session on the responsible use of AI in automated military weapons. Because again, right, maybe it's okay if your AI art program hallucinates, but we really probably shouldn't have automated deadly military weapons hallucinate. And we probably should know what happens when we stick AI into lethal devices and make sure we have a human in a loop in a number of these situations. So those are some of the things we're working on at the federal level. There is a number of pieces of different kinds of bipartisan legislation. So the good news is I've seen more sort of bipartisan cooperation on this than a lot of other subjects. Partly it's because I think many people realize that AI is not a human being. It's not sentient. It is a tool. And there's nothing probably partisan about a tool. A tool can be used for both good reasons and bad reasons. We just want to make sure that it is used for good reasons and not for bad reasons to harm society. So with that, happy to answer questions. Thanks so much for having me here.
Am I on? Thank you for that, Congressman. Let's have a seat.
Okay.
And we want to make sure we interact because everybody doesn't get a chance to talk to their congressperson. So we got folks with mics all around. I'm going to come to you, Louis, in 1 second. We'll start here, and then we'll go there. A couple questions.
So how do we know what the sourcing is of the AI we're using? In other words, how do we know it's a reliable source? Is there some way of checking out AI that you ask it to do a task, you get a response, but how do we know that where they're sourcing this? Because you go to social media and there's all kinds of lies and bad information. The internet is full of bad information. Is there some way of knowing whether the AI we're using is telling us the truth, let's say?
So thank you for that question. I think you're asking two things. One is, if you look at a video or an essay or hear an audio, how do you know if that was AI generated or not, and whether it's true or not? So it's a little different. In terms of audio, there's actually this technology called liveness technology that is pretty darn effective. It can tell you, essentially, is the voice you're hearing human or not human? It turns out that when we talk, every second, there's like thousands of variables happening in the sound. Very hard for AI to mimic that. So with audio, and this has been installed at some banks where people use audio to authenticate certain things, to basically tell the bank or the institution, hey, is this voice other than human or not human? Video is a little harder. There is something called the Content Authority Initiative. You can just go search for that on the internet. So the number of companies, both Silicon Valley companies, as well as media organizations, are trying to figure out, can we put some sort of watermark on a video where you can sort of click on it and it'll tell you the source and was this, altered and so on. The technology for detecting if something's a deep fake video is still not that great. It's better than nothing, but we're not quite there yet.
Thank you for that. Hold on. We have one question here.
Yeah, Congressman Louis Diaz, Planning Commissioner, proud teacher. My question is in respect to the AI vehicles, more here in California, where the governor is allowing the EDD to test run 10,000-pound vehicles without human drivers. There's a resolution supporting the SB 915, the state bill which would give local municipalities, as you touched on, more power or control of how autonomous vehicles companies can operate in their jurisdictions. Currently, the governor is allowing a non-human element in that, and seriously egregious and opposed to that for our families, for the communities at large.
Thank you for sharing that information. By the way, just as an aside, one of the reasons America is great is because of our unions. So thank you for that. It's clear to me that at this present moment, we are not there yet in terms of automated vehicles. There is, to me, still far too much risk in sort of just having automated vehicles run around. There's still a lot of things they can't quite figure out with automated vehicles and ways to trick it. I don't know enough about that bill, so I'll look into it. I'll get back to you. I also do think local jurisdictions should be able to decide, hey, do I want automated vehicles running around on my streets? So I would hope that the state does not mandate anything like that.
Thank you. I want to get this young lady's question right here with her hand up, please.
Angie Silverman. I have a question for you as it regards to is the problem that you can't really resolve at 100% because between the molecules and the everything that makes a molecule inside, it can't get to the zero, no problem? Is it kind of like that?
So maybe the best way to think about it is because the calculations it's doing are so humongous and there's so much data being processed that we can't sort of figure out a way to follow it. That's probably the best way to think about it. Now, just so you know, that might be okay if you could run enough simulations and tests of sort of every possible scenario you can think of, and it might be able to work. I just think different uses have different risks. And so if you're going to stick it in a plane, I think that's very different than if you're going to use it as, you know, a program that helps tutor kids, right? Even though there's going to be risk where it provides bad information, it's probably not going to kill anyone if it does that, right? So I think it just depends on the use case and the amount of risk we're willing to accept as a society for each use case.
Thank you. And we'll take our one last question right here.
Thank you for being here, Congressmember Lieu. My question is, since you mentioned that we can't really tell how AI is working, I've done some programming where I can think it through in my head from start to finish and know what's impacting that. But if, I think you said that we can't really trace that with AI now. My question would be, can we vet AI using AI? So is there a way to look at, say, speech by President Biden and actually research, was he in this location? Did he make this? Some way to vet the fake video. And because there's so many variables, excuse me, maybe it would take something like AI to trace all that. Do you think that's feasible?
It could be, and so let me sort of answer it this way. I think it's probably a good idea when you're on social media and you sort of see videos and audio and so on to be a little bit skeptical of what you're seeing and do a double check. That's going to be different than how most of you are going to get AI, right? Most of you are going to get AI in the form of a product that a company probably spent a lot of time on, vetting, testing, and so on. And it's it's going to be something that you're just going to be able to sort of use pretty easy. So I'll give you an example. So for example, when we think about word processors, right? I don't know how to program a word processor, and I bet most of you don't know either. But what happened is we started to get, Microsoft Word, and we're like, this is sort of cool. You can do spell check on it. You can, indent paragraphs pretty easily. You can drop footnotes and add endnotes and do all this stuff. And it was quite easy to use. And before you knew it, we had less secretaries, right? But the way that it came to people was in this product that was very easy to use. And that's how most of you will experience AI. And so I don't want you to not use a word processor or not use your AI application, because most of it is going to be pretty good for what it needs to be doing. And you can get rid of you can deal with the problems of hallucination and this traceability by simply having a human in a loop, some sort of human confirmation. So I'll give you an example. There's going to be, actually there already are, so applications that help, let's say, a dentist's office schedule an appointment. So for that AI to schedule an appointment, let's say someone calls up and says, I want to, have a dentist appointment next Tuesday at 10 a.m. That AI doesn't have to know about Shakespeare, doesn't know about World War II. It can be trained, right, on a pretty tight data set that's vetted. And at the end of it, it's going to say something like, so we have an appointment for you next Tuesday at 10 a.m., correct? And then the human will say yes or no. But because of that, you can basically sort of get rid of this hallucination and traceability problem, because there's going to be a human confirmation at the end. So a lot of this AI can be used pretty effectively as long as there are human beings somewhere in the loop. So the issues they're talking about is sort of where you send the AI out with no human sort of oversight or control, a little bit like automated vehicles. That's sort of, I don't think we're quite there yet. So that just leads me to sort of conclude on one more thing. We also don't know what tasks will be made more efficient or eliminated in the future, or what new tasks will be created. Up to about 2 years ago, people thought, being a software programmer is probably a pretty good job. If you talk to most AI experts, they would say, you probably shouldn't do that, because AI is going to write most software programming now and into the future. So it's hard to even know that. And so I hope local governments will invest more in workforce retraining, because you never know which position might have less of and what positions you might need more of.
All right. Thank you for the questions. Let's give the Congressman another hand. Thank you for your time.